The old Victorian house on Maple Street had been in our family for 4 generations. When Grandma Rose passed away 18 months ago, she left it to me in her will, much to my family's surprise and displeasure. At 29, I was the youngest of 3 siblings, working what my family considered a dead-end government job. My older brothers, Marcus and David, had both gone into private business. Marcus, 33, ran a struggling construction company, always one bad contract away from bankruptcy. David, 31, worked in real estate but hadn't closed a significant deal in over a year. They had expected to inherit portions of Grandma's estate, particularly the house, worth about $340,000 in our rapidly gentrifying neighborhood. Instead, Grandma's will had been very specific. To my granddaughter Sarah, who visited me every week and listened to my stories, I leave my house and all its contents. She understands the importance of preserving family history. The reading of the will had been uncomfortable. Mom cried, claiming it wasn't fair that the baby of the family got the most valuable asset. Dad accused me of manipulating an elderly woman. My brothers alternated between sulking and making pointed comments about people who take advantage of old ladies. But I hadn't manipulated anyone. I had simply spent time with Grandma, listening to her stories about the house's history, the changes in the neighborhood, and the families who'd lived there over the decades. She'd often mentioned how important it was to preserve the past, to understand where we came from. What my family didn't know was that those conversations had become much more than nostalgic reminiscences. I worked as a federal investigator specializing in organized crime and racketeering. My family thought I was a government clerk because I'd never corrected their assumptions. It was easier to let them believe I filed paperwork all day than to explain that I built cases against criminal organizations. The house on Maple Street sat directly across from what had long been the headquarters of the Torino crime family. For 60 years, Grandma had unknowingly documented the comings and goings of one of the city's most significant criminal enterprises. Her detailed journals, photo albums, and meticulous record-keeping had become crucial evidence in our ongoing federal investigation. When I inherited the house, I immediately informed my supervisor about the potential conflict of interest. The Bureau had been monitoring the Torino operation for 3 years, and Grandma's documentation provided the historical context we needed to establish patterns of criminal activity dating back decades. The house itself wasn't just valuable real estate, it was an active crime scene preservation site. Every room contained potential evidence. Grandma's photo albums showed decades of suspicious activity across the street. Her journals noted license plate numbers, unusual visitors, and strange late-night activities that perfectly corroborated our surveillance data. 6 months ago, the house had been quietly placed under federal protection as part of our case against Tony Torino and 15 of his associates. The property was legally designated as evidence, though this information was classified and couldn't be shared with my family. My brothers had spent the past year pressuring me to sell the house and split the proceeds 3 ways. "It's just sitting there empty," Marcus complained at every family gathering. "You're not even living in it," David would add. "The market's hot right now. We could get way more than it's worth if we sell soon." Sarah's being stubborn, Mom would sigh. "She's always been possessive of things that don't really belong to her." Dad's approach was more direct. "That house is too much responsibility for someone your age. Let your brothers handle the business side." But I couldn't sell the house because it wasn't really mine to sell anymore. Once property becomes evidence in a federal case, it's essentially frozen until the investigation concludes. The Bureau had been very clear. Any attempt to alter, sell, or transfer the property would constitute obstruction of justice. I tried to discourage my family's pressure without revealing the federal complications. "I'm not ready to sell yet," I'd say. "I want to go through Grandma's things first." "You've had 18 months, Marcus would snap. "How long does it take to pack up some old lady's junk?" "Some of us have real financial pressures," David would add. "That house represents serious money just sitting there doing nothing." The situation escalated 3 weeks ago when Marcus started bringing potential buyers to family dinners, real estate agents, property developers, investors, anyone who might pressure me to sell quickly. "This is Sarah," he'd say, introducing me like I was an obstacle to overcome. "She's the one holding up the sale." The potential buyers would look at me with barely concealed irritation, as if I were a difficult child refusing to be reasonable. Sometimes family members get emotionally attached to properties, one agent explained condescendingly. Holding on to real estate for sentimental reasons isn't financially smart, a developer added. Young people inherit property and don't understand the carrying costs, insurance, taxes, maintenance, it adds up quickly. My family nodded along, treating these strangers' opinions as expert validation of their own frustrations. Last Sunday's family dinner had been the worst yet. Marcus arrived with a purchase agreement already filled out, missing only my signature and the final sale price. I found a buyer willing to pay $380,000 cash, he announced, spreading the papers across Mom's dining table. $40,000 over market value. We can close in 2 weeks. That's incredible, Mom gushed. Sarah, you have to take this deal. Dad examined the paperwork approvingly. This buyer is serious. Cash offers don't come along often. I told him we'd have an answer by tomorrow, Marcus continued. He's ready to put down earnest money immediately. David pulled out his phone calculator. After closing costs and fees, we're looking at about $125,000 each. That's life-changing money for some of us. Anyway, Marcus said, glancing at me, I guess when you're used to a government salary, any amount seems huge. The comment stung. In their minds, I was some low-level clerk grateful for whatever scraps came my way. I can't sell the house right now, I said quietly. Why not? Mom demanded. You've been saying that for over a year. What are you waiting for? I'm still going through Grandma's belongings. So pack them up and take what you want, Dad said impatiently. The buyer doesn't want the contents anyway. It's more complicated than that. Marcus slammed his hand on the table. Everything's always complicated with you. Some of us have real responsibilities. My business needs capital, and this sale could save my company. David's having trouble with his mortgage, Mom added. This money could help both your brothers get back on their feet. And what about Sarah's financial future? David asked sarcastically. Oh, wait. She'll be fine. Government jobs have pensions. The dismissal was automatic and complete. In their minds, my stable federal employment meant I didn't need, or deserve, the inheritance money as much as my struggling brothers. I understand you both need money, I said carefully. But I can't sell the house yet. Can't or won't? Marcus demanded. There are legal complications. What legal complications? Dad asked sharply. The will was clear. You inherited the house free and clear. I couldn't explain that the property was frozen as evidence in a federal case. My security clearance prohibited me from discussing ongoing investigations, even with family. I just need more time, I said. Time for what? Mom asked, frustration evident in her voice. You're being selfish, Sarah. This isn't just about you anymore. Grandma left you that house because she trusted you to do the right thing, Dad added. Hoarding it while your brothers struggle isn't what she would have wanted. The guilt trip was familiar and effective. My family had always been experts at making me feel responsible for everyone else's problems while dismissing my own needs and concerns. I sold Grandma's house and kept the money, Marcus announced proudly at last night's family dinner. I looked up from my plate, confused. What do you mean? I found a buyer willing to pay $375,000 cash. We closed yesterday. Marcus was grinning like he'd just solved world hunger. You weren't using it anyway. Dad supported him immediately. Marcus took initiative while you were being indecisive. Mom nodded approvingly. Finally, someone in this family is thinking practically. How did you sell my house? I asked, my voice carefully controlled. I had copies of the deed from when we were getting everything appraised, Marcus explained. Found a buyer who wanted a quick transaction. No inspections, cash only. David helped with the paperwork, Dad added proudly. It pays to have someone in real estate in the family. We used Grandma's old power of attorney documents, David said casually. Technically, they were never officially revoked, so I was able to act as executor. I stared at my brothers, trying to process what they had just told me. They had forged legal documents to sell federal evidence in an active criminal investigation. The buyer was very understanding about the family situation, Marcus continued. He didn't ask too many questions about why the sale was being handled by the siblings instead of the heir. Some investors prefer to work with men anyway, Dad said approvingly. They know we understand business better than someone who's never had to make real financial decisions. Where's the money? I asked quietly. We split it 3 ways like it should have been from the beginning, Marcus said. Your share is in an account we set up for you, $125,000 minus the legal fees and commissions. You'll thank us later, Mom said confidently. This was the smart move financially. The buyer was very motivated, David added. Paid cash, no financing contingencies. The whole transaction took less than a week once we had the paperwork sorted out. I'll handle the paperwork, I said quietly. Marcus laughed. The paperwork's already handled. That's the beauty of having David involved. He knows how to get things done efficiently. You don't have to worry about any of the details, Dad assured me. Your brothers took care of everything. We even packed up Grandma's junk, Mom added. Most of it went to charity, but we saved a few photo albums and her jewelry for you. Everything else was just taking up space, Marcus said dismissively. Old newspapers, magazines, journals full of neighborhood gossip. Nothing worth keeping. My stomach dropped. Grandma's journals and photo albums were key evidence in our federal case. What did you do with the papers and journals? I asked carefully. Threw them out, David shrugged. Who keeps that much old paperwork? The buyer wanted the house empty anyway. Some of those documents might have been important. Important how? Marcus asked. They were just random notes about neighbors and old family stuff. Nothing valuable. We kept the photo albums with family pictures, Mom said defensively. But all those other papers were just clutter. Dad nodded agreement. Grandma was a pack rat. She kept every grocery receipt and newspaper clipping for decades. None of it was worth preserving. I excused myself from dinner and called my supervisor from my car. Agent Rodriguez, we have a problem, I said when he answered. What's happened? My family sold the Maple Street house. They also disposed of all the documentary evidence. There was a long pause. The protected property, the house that's been designated as evidence in the Torino case. Yes. They used forged power of attorney documents to complete an illegal sale. When the sale closed yesterday, they threw away Grandma's journals and papers this week. Do you know who the buyer was? They mentioned a cash sale, no inspections, quick closing, someone who didn't ask questions about the irregular paperwork. Agent Rodriguez's voice hardened. We need to meet immediately. This is obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, and possibly money laundering if the buyer was connected to our targets. What do I do about my family? Nothing yet. Don't let them know about the federal implications. We need to investigate the sale and identify the buyer before we take action. I drove home thinking about how quickly everything had unraveled. My brothers had committed multiple federal crimes trying to access money they thought they deserved. They had destroyed evidence in a major organized crime case because they saw Grandma's documentation as worthless clutter. The next morning, I was at the federal building early, meeting with Agent Rodriguez and the U.S. attorney assigned to the Torino case. We ran the buyer's information, Agent Rodriguez reported. Vincent Torino, Tony's nephew. He paid cash through a shell company. So this was deliberate, the prosecutor noted. They weren't just buying property. They were buying evidence and access to federal surveillance materials. What are the charges against my family? I asked. Obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, conspiracy to defraud the United States, and potentially conspiracy with organized crime, if we can prove they knew about the buyer's connections. They didn't know, I said. They just wanted the money. Their ignorance might reduce their sentences, the prosecutor replied, but it doesn't eliminate their criminal liability. They sold federal evidence to organized crime figures. Agent Rodriguez laid out the timeline. We'll need to arrest your brothers immediately. The house sale will have to be reversed, and we'll need to search for any remaining evidence. What about the documents they threw away? I asked. We'll check local dumps and waste facilities, he said grimly. But realistically, that evidence is probably lost forever. The prosecutor's face hardened. Your brothers may have irreparably damaged a 3-year federal investigation. Depending on what was destroyed, we may have to reconsider our entire approach to the Torino case. I thought of Marcus bragging about his business acumen, of David proud of his supposed real estate expertise, both convinced they had outsmarted their foolish little sister. Within 24 hours, federal prosecutors filed obstruction charges against both brothers. The FBI raided their homes and businesses, seizing files and electronics. Marcus was arrested at his construction site in front of employees and clients, destroying his reputation overnight. David was taken into custody at his office, led away in handcuffs while his colleagues stared in disbelief. When my parents heard, they called frantically. "What's happening?" Mom demanded. "Why are federal agents arresting your brothers?" "They sold evidence in a federal criminal investigation," I explained. "What evidence?" "It was just an old house." Grandma's house was across from an organized crime headquarters. Her journals and photos documented criminal activity for 60 years. Silence. "Then, how do you know that?" "Because I'm the federal investigator assigned to the case." "You're what?" "I work for the FBI. I've been building a case against the Torino crime family for 3 years. Grandma's documentation was crucial evidence." "But you said you were a government clerk." "I never said that. You assumed it, because you never asked what I actually do for work." Mom's voice broke. "Marcus and David are going to prison, aren't they?" "Yes. They sold federal evidence to our suspects. Obstruction of justice alone carries up to 10 years. Evidence tampering adds 5. Conspiracy could add even more." Mom started to cry. "They didn't know. They were just trying to help the family financially. Their intent doesn't matter. They committed federal crimes. Can't you help them? You work for the FBI. I'm a witness in their case now. I can't help them." Dad took the phone. "Sarah, I don't understand how this happened. You and Mom spent 18 months pressuring me to sell federal evidence. You supported Marcus and David when they forged documents to steal money they weren't entitled to. We didn't know. You didn't know because you never asked. You assumed I was incompetent and incapable of managing my own inheritance." Over the next week, the fallout became clear. Marcus had used the money to pay off business debts, thinking he'd secured his future. David used his share for a down payment on a new house, celebrating what he thought was financial freedom. Neither had considered that the money wasn't legally theirs. The FBI discovered that Vincent Torino had targeted them specifically, using their greed to gain access to evidence that could damage his family's criminal enterprise. "Your brothers were essentially recruited as unwitting accomplices," Agent Rodriguez explained. "The Torino organization used their ignorance to destroy federal evidence. The damage was immense. Decades of Grandma's documentation were gone. The U.S. Attorney's Office offered plea agreements, 7 years in federal prison in exchange for cooperation. Marcus accepted immediately, terrified of 20 years at trial. David resisted, but eventually pled guilty as well. Marcus received 7 years and 3 months. David got 6 years and 8 months. At sentencing, the judges were scathing. The defendants' actions weren't just theft from their sister, Judge Martinez told Marcus. They were crimes against the justice system itself, committed in partnership with the very criminals federal agents were trying to stop. Judge Williams was equally blunt with David. "The damage to ongoing investigations is immeasurable and irreversible." Afterward, Mom approached me in the courthouse hallway. "I owe you an apology," she whispered. "Yes, you do. We thought you were stubborn and selfish. We had no idea you were protecting evidence. You had no idea because you never respected me enough to ask." Dad looked older than I'd ever seen him. "Your brothers are going to federal prison because we pushed them to steal from you." "They're going to prison because they chose to commit crimes," I corrected. "You all decided I was incompetent and unworthy of respect. That's what led to this. How do we fix this?" Mom asked. "You don't," I said. "Marcus and David will serve their sentences. The case will proceed without the evidence they destroyed. And I'll continue my work knowing my own family sabotaged me because they thought I was too stupid to manage my own inheritance." I walked away that day and never spoke to my parents again. The house on Maple Street was voided from the sale and remains sealed as federal evidence. My brothers are serving their sentences in different prisons, eligible for parole in 5 years. I continue working organized crime cases, respected now as an investigator who knows the value of protecting evidence. Sometimes family believes they know best. Sometimes they are so certain of their expertise they'll commit federal crimes to override your decisions. And sometimes, the quiet family member they've dismissed for years turns out to be the only one who truly understood the stakes. The justice system doesn't care about family drama or financial pressures. It cares about evidence, truth, and the rule of law. My brothers learned that too late, in orange jumpsuits. I learned it much earlier, which is why I spent 3 years quietly protecting evidence while they spent 3 years loudly demanding I destroy it. In the end, patience and professionalism prevailed over greed and arrogance, but the cost was higher than anyone imagined. 2 brothers in prison. Parents who finally understood their youngest daughter's true capabilities. And a major organized crime investigation permanently weakened by family who thought they knew better than the federal agent they never bothered to understand.